Hello, I'm Nick Tyrone, neoliberal centrist dad. I'm back with you for another round. So I'm here today to discuss, well, Trump, really, because that's the thing that's on everyone's mind. For those of you who are watching this at perhaps a later date, this is the week in which Trump has essentially he's called Zelensky a dictator. He has intimated that Ukraine started the war, and it actually has put out some stuff on social media which sounds so much like Kremlin propaganda, it's pretty remarkable. So what I'm going to talk about today is, well, I'm going to start with why I think Trump won, and actually how we could try and take whatever positives we can out of that in terms of thinking about the future, so thinking about where we go from here. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about what Trump is doing and what I think that means for the near future. And dare I say it, try and come out with some, well, as positive a spin on it as I can do. So first off, just a little housekeeping. One, thank you to Bloomsbury Radio and Bloomsbury Institute for hosting this. All the opinions being expressed here are mine and mine alone. So just so we're clear on that, partially because actually I don't really know where I'm going to go. I've got a few thoughts in my head, but I'm basically going to freewheel this based on the last couple of days, what I've seen, conversations I've had with people, and I've got a few things planned, which I hope work. But anyhow, off we go. So first of all, why did Trump win? And I think that there are plenty of reasons for that, some of which are complex. I think one I think is important to talk about because it's under the control of people who don't like Trump. So it's under the control of people who would rather Trump wasn't president and would like to see the Democrats win, or some alternative, even within the Republican Party, to Trump, and don't like Trumpism. So why did Trump win? So right after Trump, was victorious in November 2024, I wrote an article that went viral. It ended up getting picked up in the New York Post. It's the first time it ever happened to me. And it was basically around my first thoughts of why Trump had won. And I explored lots of issues in that article, but a big one was around the way we talk about masculinity, and particularly how the left deals with masculinity these days, and young men in particular, and really looking at why so many young men voted for Trump. I remember seeing a video sort of the week before the election that really started to make me go, panic a little bit. Really took me out of my comfort zone of, Harris is going to win, it'll be fine. Let's not worry, it's all going to go okay. And it was a guy who'd gone to, sort of roving mic on a college campus, a university campus somewhere in America. And he just asked all these young men who they're voting for, and everyone, it wasn't just that they said Trump, it's that they were so enthusiastically about to vote Trump. It's Trump, man, Trump. And I thought, okay. And that really stuck in my head. And I'll come on to other points of what sort of backs that up. But what I'd like you to do is, I'd like to read just a bit of the article I wrote. So remember, this is November 2024, maybe the day after or a couple days after. I mean, it would have been certainly written within 48 hours of the result being known. And I just want to read it word for word for you to sort of encapsulate sort of what I'm going for in this section, which is, here it goes. A lot of young men voted for Donald Trump. While I am not a fan of Trump myself, I get it. I think the whole toxic masculinity narrative has been a total disaster for the center-left, more so than anything else. Young men are being told constantly that they do not matter, that they should shut up, that they have privilege, and many of the things they like to do for fun are somehow problematic. This is why people like Andrew Tate have such a seemingly inexplicable large following, who is creating a positive view of masculinity from a liberal left perspective. This has created a gaping space for Trump that he has happily driven into, and he's parked the bus. Call me naive, but when you expend all of your political energy annoying both men and women, that refers to something else earlier in the article. What's left? I've used the left there, obviously, as a slightly double meaning. So I think that what the left should take away from Trump's victory, at least on this particular subject, is that I think the big thing is, I think people on the left like to see this as a sort of choice between their sort of slightly utopian vision of a kind of liberal future where all the problems are ironed out, and both men and women have just total freedom to live as they like, and there's sort of no negative liberty, if you like. There's no problems, there's no overlaps. We've ironed out all the problems, and we sort of have a sort of perfect utopian society. And then so it's either sort of a choice between that or the Trump stuff, the properly sexist stuff, the Andrew Tate stuff, all that. And I don't think it is. I think it's actually a choice between some version of liberalism that works best and gives women the most possible personal freedom that, anyone can have in the society, but has a kind of a place for everyone somehow. And I just think in order for any left-wing political movement to be sustainable, I think there has to be some sort of framework for young men. I just don't think it's avoidable. And that's, until we find that, I think that the horrible sexist stuff kind of keeps winning, and Trump keeps winning. So I would. There's a young man I work with. I won't name him. I'm tempted to, because I think he probably wouldn't mind, but I haven't asked him, so I won't name check him. But anyway, he had a story that really struck me. He's a conservative. He's joined the Conservative Party. He's young. He's 22, 23. And he comes from the north, and he comes from what I understand to be like quite a labor-oriented family. And he was just sort of always naturally, a labor supporter, always sort of saw himself on the center left. And he said a lot of his experiences in university really changed him, because he was constantly kind of being told that there was no place for him and that he had to shut up and he had to sort of, stick to his place. And I think that, I just don't think that people understand how profoundly alienating that is. One thing I'd point out, Pete Buttigieg, the Democrat in America, he's come out, I think, in the last couple of days, and he said something really interesting about some of this stuff, actually, about how, some of the stuff that the left has pursued, particularly in America over the last few years, he likened it to sort of like being so bad it's like a parody sketch. It would have been like a parody sketch 10 years ago. And I think he's kind of onto something. I think what's interesting is Buttigieg's intervention is one of the few I've seen. I think a lot of the left are still very much in denial. And I suppose you can say, well, it was only a few months ago and it's early doors. But one of the strange things I find is when I look at the left in America, it kind of weirdly reminds me of the Conservative Party in Britain. So it's very much like, there's been a loss, a big electoral loss, and there's a huge sort of culture of denial around it, just a sort of refusal to learn lessons or come to any conclusions or just draw any lessons from what has happened. If you're asking me, well, what's your big solution on how to fix this? I tried to put my 2 cents in a few years ago. I wrote a book. It had the working title of The Secret Lives of Straight Men, which was quite a pointed title, but really what it was about was male friendships mostly, and in fact detailed particular male friendships, and actually one in particular that was really focused on, with some lessons, basically, sort of trying to, in essence, come to this liberal version of kind of masculinity, the role of young men in society. And I couldn't get it published. I think one of the reasons, to be honest, is I think some of the early versions I had just weren't quite there, and I think it probably had issues. But I noticed that once I sort of ironed those out, and I was still having discussions with agents and publishing houses, I still couldn't get it published. And I think one particular agent was very honest with me, and I really appreciated it in retrospect. And he said, look, however good you make this thing, no one is going to publish it. You'd have to be a lot more famous than you are for it to have a chance. But even then, actually, even if you really were that much more famous, I don't really know that there's any publishing houses that want to publish something about the lives of straight men and their friendships. That is not where publishing is right now. And I think that kind of gets to the crux of it. I mean, particularly given so much of the publishing world is tilted to the left, and it sort of represents a kind of... I guess what I'm trying to come to is that there's a sort of denial of reality, and then what happens is reality sets in. It's a lot like Brexit, actually, if we're flipping this around politically, you do something and it doesn't work, and instead of saying, you know what, maybe we had some misgivings about this, it's so much easier. I think it's a human trait to double down and say, no, we got this right. The problem is whatever. The classic one that everyone reaches to is the stabbed in the back sort of theory. That's the thing that keeps repeating throughout history. So anyway, the book, I explored some stuff in the past. I tried to make it as exciting as possible. I covered what I felt were interesting friendships in the context of interesting parts of my life. So one chapter was about when I was a bass player in a series of country and western bands touring the United States. So that's a bit there. Much more controversially these days. And I think this probably wouldn't have helped trying to get it published. My experience as a DJ, I was a disc jockey in a strip club. And yeah, that definitely doesn't pass the PC barrier these days. But the largest section of the book, as I said, was focused on one particular friendship, and it was a friendship with an American guy named Lee Kazimir. Lee was a filmmaker, a very accomplished one, had his film shown in lots of major film festivals around the world. A particularly one that he made that I wasn't particularly involved in. I actually am in the movie a couple of times, but I mean, it's entirely his creation. But it came from a suggestion that I made. We were, I don't want to have to tell the whole story. We were in Spain and we got up to some strange stuff. And basically we had to walk the only way we could get to the rail station to get back to Barcelona, or in fact anywhere, was to walk about 4 miles across across farms, etc. And while we were walking, Lee was complaining the whole time. And I'd mentioned, we both were big Werner Herzog fans. And I mentioned to him that, that Herzog once said that if you should skip film school, and instead, if you want to understand how to be a filmmaker, you should walk from Madrid to Kyiv. And I was sort of saying this to bait him, because he was being so moany about having to walk across this. Actually, I mean, it was a lovely day, and, it was the Spanish sunshine and the Pyrenees in the background. I mean, it was all perfectly lovely, and he was really having a right moan. Anyway, we eventually did get on the train, and what he said to me was, I'm going to do that. And I said, what? Well, I'm going to walk from Madrid to Kyiv, and furthermore, I'm going to make a film about it. I'm going to make the film. And I said, hold on, you're going to do the walk, and then you're going to make the film. How's that going to work? And he said, no, I'll figure it out. And he did. He went on the walk. It took him 6 months to walk from Madrid to Kyiv. And he got the film shown at Slamdance in Park City, which is one of the biggest indie film festivals in the world. And and basically the portions of The Secret Lives of Straight Men details his walk, it details the movie afterwards, also bits of the time we spent in Spain. There was an unfortunate incident in Weston-super-Mare that was detailed. And the book starts off with Lee and I meeting. We were both involved in a film society in London, and where we got to know one another. And what I'd like to do, I'm going to try something here. I'm going to read the first 5 or 6 pages. It's a very short bit, but I wanted to give you a flavor for it, and I'd also like to get your feedback on it, because one of the things is, would I ever get this published? I don't really know. And I think there's something in it, and I think coming back to when I was thinking about this idea, right when Trump got elected, and the whole idea of, young men and masculinity and the sort of putting it back on myself, it's like, well, what's your answer? And I mean, this is as close as I could kind of ever get, and it was done in a very storytelling type way, but I'm going to give you the intro just to give you a flavor. It involves the Cannes Film Festival and some odd characters. So I'm going to give this a whirl and see what you think. Right. So, where is it in front of me? I met Lee at the Cannes Film Festival in 2003. Actually, that's not strictly true. We met in London before that, albeit briefly. We were part of this filmmaking club at UCL, that's University College London, for those who don't know, where gear was shared out to ease the burden of trying to produce independent movies. There was sometimes work to be got from this club, but the main point of it was you could get free film equipment to use on your own projects. I had a tripod, which I had signed out for another week, but I didn't actually need any longer in my possession. And I let others know, we had a main online chat room that it could be passed on if anyone needed it urgently. And this led to a phone call I received out of the blue one evening from an American voice that introduced himself as Lee. He asked if he could have the tripod immediately. Sure, I said, I'll give you the address and you can pick it up whenever you like. After I told him where I lived, he got antsy. Jesus, that's the other side of town from me. Could we meet in the West End or something? All right, I said, mildly annoyed. I was doing him a favor in the first place by giving him the tripod when I was under no obligation to do so. Now I was signing up to an otherwise needless trip into town, having to carry the thing all the way there. And actually, it was quite heavy and annoying to get on the tube. But anyway, I digress. We made plans to meet up in Soho. I remember laying eyes on him for the first time. He was one of those guys who looked geeky as hell, yet also cool at the same time. It's kind of an impossible thing to describe. He waltzed up, asked my name, and after I responded, took the tripod without a single further word. Not even a pensive half-assed, thank you. This greatly annoyed me. You know, I'm thinking I schlepped this thing all the way down here for this guy, and he doesn't even offer basic gratitude, or for that matter, even engage me in 30 seconds of polite conversation. I hoped I would never see this Lee character ever again. This is why I was so annoyed when I found myself face-to-face with him again, this time in the south of France. We had both had the misfortune of being in the acquaintance of one Zara Fahisatine Hicks. Don't worry, by the way, if you're thinking I'm taking the mickey out of someone, I have changed the name of this person to obscure their identity. So there really was someone based on Zara Fahisatine Hicks, but that wasn't actually her name. She was a posh girl in her early 20s who was trying to make a name for herself as an art director in the London film scene. People hung out with her and even let her work on their films, mostly because she was rich and they hoped to get film funding out of her one day. But actually, something much more important than that was Zara had a father who ran one of the biggest film festivals in Europe. Almost everyone who worked with her or even consorted with Zara hoped being friends with Miss Fahisatine Hicks would be enough to get a place in that film festival someday. That was always in vain, from what I could later tell, but that never stopped newcomers from trying. One day, about a month after I met Lee for the first time, she approached me and a few other people in our little indie filmmaker circle with a plan around going to the Cannes Film Festival that year. I've got a villa out there, guys. Well, it's my dad's, obviously, but we can all stay there. Well, some of you can. It's not that big. And I have a few of us booked into big screenings and loads of parties. We'll all have fun. It's going to be great. I took the hint on the villa space limitation issue and got myself a hotel room in Nice. I rented a dinner jacket, I recall, for £100 because I was told by Zara I'd need it, seeing as we'd be going to all these big screenings and you needed a DJ to get in. And I also strategically booked myself on the same flight as Zara. That's so cool, we're on the same plane together. My mother and father are going to be on the same flight as well, she told me when I informed her of being on the same flight. And now hearing this, I figured obviously I'd won the jackpot. I imagined sitting there all the way to France next to Zara's film festival director father, regaling him with tales of my recent struggles in the film industry and my ambitions as a filmmaker and myself and how he was just going to, as the plane descended into the Alps, with the Alps framing the background, he turned to me and offered to put whatever my next picture happened to be in his big fancy film festival. The actual experience was a predictable letdown, not because my efforts to charm Mr. Fahisatine failed to land, but because I didn't even get to meet him. Never mind sit next to the man. I arrived at the airport gate to find Zara all by herself. Hey, I thought your parents were coming with us. She giggled and then pointed to an older couple about 50 feet away at the same gate. They don't like to associate me while we're traveling abroad. They say it fosters neediness in children and that since I was flying with a boy, they would leave me to it. I wanted to ask something along the lines of, can I at least meet your father? But that was obvious that I'd walked into a minefield of light-touch parental mental abuse, and as it happens, that was the closest I ever came to meeting the famous film festival director. Instead, I spent the flight getting to know Zara better, which wasn't entirely pleasant. She spent her childhood being intentionally ignored by her parents and had justified all this into a character-building exercise. We also talked about her taste in films, a subject I had studiously avoided with her to that point because I had a hunch that her taste was terrible. My gut instinct turned out to be bang on there. Her list of favorite films was quite horrific to experience. For instance, a generous period of the flight was taken up with Zara's explanation of why Mannequin is the greatest movie ever made. For those who don't remember Mannequin is a 1987 film starring Andrew McCarthy. He was a big star at the time. He was in Breakfast Club. Was he in Breakfast Club? I've just realized it. No, he was in Pretty in Pink. Sorry, Pretty in Pink. Another John Hughes movie. He was in John Hughes movies. Anyway, this was sort of going to be his big star vehicle that never really took off. And he works as a kind of he's an artist who works with mannequin like store dummies. again, it doesn't make any more sense in the actual film. And one of his creations turns into a pre-Sex and the City Kim Cattrall. It was unique in the 80s as being both a huge flop and a massive being massively critically lambasted, quite deservedly so. Anyway, the morning after I got to the south of France, I took the train from Nice to Cannes. It was along a beautiful part of the Côte d'Azur, and I thought about, I was really worried that Zara was going to let us down, and I was not wrong there. I was pretty bang on. She showed up, and there was about 6 of us, six or seven maybe. No one I knew, or at least I didn't recognize anyone. And she showed up and she said, "Look, guys, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to be working during the film festival. I've got a job at the festival, so I'm basically abandoning you." And it was all just basically like, "Look, I've got a well-connected father. What do you want? Them's the breaks." 5 minutes after, she had arrived, and actually I had started on my Cannes Film Festival adventure. Zara was already off, telling our quartet that she was leaving us in the dust. She left with the words, "Hate to love you and leave you guys, but Cannes is about work." So everybody but 2 of us got up and left right then and there. I never saw them ever again in my life. And this left me sat across the table from a young guy, looked about 21, 22, and I introduced myself to him. And he said, "We've met before." And with that came the American accent and placed him for me immediately. "You gave me a tripod, remember? It's Lee." Oh, rubbish, I thought. This was well below my worst-case scenario for the Cannes trip. So I will leave it there. That's my introduction to Lee. And I bring it up because I think one of the things about male friendships is they can often, some of the best ones can begin very oddly. I have a very good friend in London, actually, who we couldn't have got off to a worse start. I mean, it was just the absolute... I'll tell it to you sometime, maybe in another later podcast, but it was a total car crash. And yet we are friends 20 years later. Male friendships, crazy thing. Anyway, I feel like I've sort of covered that topic, and what I want to close on now is obviously Trump, Ukraine, where we go from here, what does it mean? I'm going to try and put the Trump stuff in a positive light, not because obviously I agree with anything that Trump has said or his strategy with Ukraine and Russia, but here's what I think. I think the positives out of this, at least long term, will be the following. I think it's going to, Trump's talked all this stuff, about how this is a wake-up call for Europe and et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think he means any of that in any sort of significant way, but I think he's accidentally right. I think that actually Europe really does need to wake up. I think Europe needs to take a lot more control over its security than it has, much more. I think that has to really fast forward. Apparently, I was talking to someone who lives in Germany. He's very close to German politics. Said one of the big things that's on the docket now is rearmament. Trying to, actually, basically for Germany, which has obviously just been basically militarily dormant since the end of the Second World War, and given its place in Central Europe and the threat of Russian revanchism, that actually they have to militarily rearm it. And apparently that's reasonably popular, at least through most of Western Germany. So anyway, we'll see. We'll see after the election that's coming up how that does and what happens there. And I think that probably was necessary. I think also for those of you, a lot of you watch my channels and read my Substack because you don't like Brexit. And what I'd say is, I think overall this may actually fast forward Britain's re-engagement with Europe, but also actually possibly really actually rejoining the EU. Because if you're looking, as part of the explanation of Brexit has always been, this will bring us closer to America. This will allow us to have this trade deal with the US. And just under Trumpism, it's really difficult to see how... that has just been cruelly exposed in the worst possible way, at least from a Brexiter point of view. And I just feel like actually now Britain is going to look ever increasingly exposed, not being in the EU. And I realize people are going to say to me immediately, well, the EU, what does the EU have to do with security? And I guess it's arguable that it doesn't. But actually, I think that possibly more and more it will. If more and more, if European countries are going to come together more and more on security, Britain's going to have to be a part of that. And then you have to sort of wonder if that's getting deeper and deeper. Why are we economically limiting ourselves with the rest of the continent when actually the whole there's a protectionist America that wants to run away from the world that's no longer available? And obviously, where else are we going? I mean, actually, there are rumors. I don't want to go into how much I know or don't know about this, but there are rumors that Canada is not entirely unserious about at least pursuing the idea of EU accession, of actually joining the EU. Because if you think about it, if their relationship with America is going to fall apart, where does Canada go? And eventually, actually, it kind of makes Europe more the center of the Western world again. And I don't know, maybe long term that's not a bad thing. Like, actually, maybe it will wake Europe up a little bit, and maybe some of the problems that Europe have had, with growth, with a whole number of things, it will force Europe a little bit to take some chances and think about these things and get organized. Anyway, that's the most positive thing. That's my most positive spin I can put on it. Obviously, the negative spin is we're witnessing the end of Pax Americana, and with that, we could have Putin rolling tanks into the Baltics or even Poland, and that will be possibly the start of World War III. So I get that there are loads of negatives, but I wanted to try and put some sort of positive spin on that. So I'll close with that. I've covered a lot of topics here, and it's been fun. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. That always just helps everything. And also, thank you as ever to Bloomsbury Radio and Bloomsbury Institute. I'm Nick Tyrone, neoliberal centrist dad. Thank you for joining me.